Welcome to the PerformX Podcast. Today we're at David Lloyd Royal Berkshire, joined by the Myzone team. A few weeks out from PerformX 2026, and pleasure to have you guys on.
Good to see you. Thanks, Giles.
Do you want to introduce yourselves for people that might not have met you guys before?
Sure. Heather, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Heather McKee. I'm a behavioural scientist, so I'm concerned with all things motivation.
That's very succinct. That was good.
Yeah.
My name's Jay Worthy. I'm a global CEO for Myzone. Been with Myzone for a couple of years. I'm also a Hall of Fame superstar on Myzone, so I've been using the product now for more than 6.5 years as a consumer, and I've been in the industry for a couple of decades, so I'm an old timer, as the white beard would suggest.
And it's been a big few months of change for Myzone. Jay, can you give me the headline? What's really changed for, and what's the next chapter looking like?
Yeah, well, number one, as I mentioned, I've used the product and the platform for 6.5 years, and I love it. And so the opportunity to come in as CEO was too good to pass down. When I came in, I spent a lot of time talking to our team, to our customers around the world, to stakeholders all across the world who've been involved in Myzone in some capacity or another. And one of the things that was overwhelming to me was we weren't really clear on who we were and what we stood for. We'd had an amazing ride of 14 years. But we hadn't got really crisp on the value that we had. So somewhere along the line that had started to get lost a little bit. And so for us, we went on a bit of a voyage of discovery to say, okay, let's get really clear on who we are, what we stand for, and how we want to show up. And the way that we did that was not sit in an echo chamber and figure it out for ourselves as a leadership team, but we actually commissioned research. So we went out to consumers, existing Myzoners, non-Myzoners, competitive product users, and operators as well. And we were essentially asking the questions, right, what is Myzone? What does it stand for? What do you love about it? What do you not love about it? And there's some pretty powerful stuff. Most of what we learned stopped us in our tracks, because we kind of thought that essentially people would love the hardware, the belt, and there was some really good stuff in there. They loved the red belt. That was actually a really powerful part of the brand. They loved the audible beep when you put it on and it tells you your workout's about to get started. I'm sure there's some great psychology elements to that, and that was all great, but actually the bigger picture was people really loved the way that Myzone made them feel. And so that just started off this whole journey, which actually had us ending up reaching out to Heather and starting to work with her, because we started to realize that Myzone played a big part in what people need to achieve. And it wasn't necessarily about the hardware. It was a lot about how we made them feel and how we helped them on their journey. So we started working with Heather. We decided that we needed to do a better job of telling that story. And that's where this notion of MoTech, motivation technology, was born, with Heather's support. And now I think the simplest way to summarize it is we kind of went from this point where we had these ideas about what would work as a business, and we tried to implement them, and we were kind of testing and learning on the go. So we went from, we think this works, we're going to give it a try, to now we know this works and here's why. And so we're able to back up everything we do with evidence with Heather's support.
Brilliant, and I love the ethos behind where it's going, which we'll dig into. But Heather, you joined the team as a motivation scientist advisor. Is that right?
Yes, correct. A lofty title.
That is a lofty title. From your perspective, what's broken about how the fitness industry sees motivation?
Yeah, great question. I think the fitness industry treats motivation as like a personality trait, like it's something that you have or you don't have. And that's not the way motivation works. Motivation is a bit of a fickle beast. It depends, how well fed you are, what kind of mood you're in, whether you got a bad email from your boss or something. But basically the industry isn't set up for real people's lives. We kind of have set up for perfect motivation, perfect lives, rather than actually, well, what happens when you get a setback, when you have an injury, when you've got less time, how do we actually then continue to support people through that? And I think that's where things have gone wrong, where we're focusing far too much on that kind of short-term motivation that gets people in the door, rather than actually looking at adherence, which is really important in behavioral science in terms of it's not just about access, it's about long-term engagement, less about how many people start, but how many people stay, a year or 2 years, 6.5 years down the line, and I think that's what's really kind of broken about the industry, is we're just looking at motivation all wrong. We're looking at it as an access problem rather than an adherence problem.
I love that about it not being a personality trait. I think that's such a key. It's such a key penny drop, isn't it? Sounds obvious, but it's not. No, most people wouldn't think about it like
and
that.
how many of us have heard someone say, "Oh, they're just really motivated," but it's not. It's not motivation. It's a whole host of other things that actually keep people engaged long term.
And the people I know that big advocates for Myzone, they always talk about how it gets those people hooked, and it's not the ultra motivated. It's the people that are. It's getting that person that otherwise wouldn't, that would bounce out to go, actually, this has given me something, kind of thing. So so talk to me about the MoTech. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing about MoTech, and this is how they hooked me in. I was very interested in this. Was that I've worked in the fitness industry for years and in wearables and all of that. And, it's all focused on the body and physiology. But this was one of the first times people said, no, actually, we're going to put psychology at the forefront because we know that that is what helps people stay the course. It's not just about physiology. It's not just about more metrics. Actually, what matters is more meaningful metrics. And so instead of throwing everything in the kitchen sink at people all the time, it's about bringing it back to actually what matters. Are we focusing on effort, not just outcomes? Which, from a behavioural scientist's point of view, is like music to my ears. Because for years, and that's what all the studies show is like, let's focus on effort. Let's take away that extrinsic focus, that focus on, the medals around your neck or the time in the race, and let's actually focus on how you feel in yourself. And I think Jay said it lovely about like that it's actually not about those metrics and the numbers. It's actually about how you feel inside, and we'll always remember how things made us feel more than actually what were the numbers on the screen. And I think that's what Myzone are really doubling down on as well, and they really recognise that that's what they do so well as a brand, and I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, and I think that it's always what we've done. We've always been about effort, and that's what I love about the lens that Heather's brought to us. Is it's really helped us to see the value that we add. It was always about effort. It's Myzone, MEPS and Myzone effort points. So it's all about rewarding effort. And so we recognize that, and it's allowed us to kind of grab that and say, okay, well, how do we bring that to life in a different way? And so, we just recently launched streaks, for example. And so there's an element of forgiveness in the streaks because Heather's educated us to let us know, okay, well, this kind of do or die, if you don't hit it, you lose it all, is really not helpful for driving long-term behavior change. So we grabbed that. Vahid, who's our CTO, who's incredible, as you know, his team grabbed that and said, okay, well, let's build forgiveness into the product. And that's just a really nice real-world example of where we're taking the science and say, okay, this is not just a nice industry soundbite where we jump on a podcast and we say some nice stuff. It's meaningful. It's actually happening in our business. And we're taking what we're learning. It's basically every day's a school day. We learn. In fact, we just recently had a strategic offsite with our senior leadership team. And Heather dialed in, and we went through our product roadmap and we said, okay, help us understand how do we prioritize these things, which are going to have the most value in helping people create lasting behavior change. So it's real and living in our business.
I love that. And I think that's an important point around building forgiveness into the product. Otherwise, a lot of fitness just talks to the fit, right? And you're trying to, again, it's that point around how do we get the less engaged to become more engaged, and that forgiveness is a big thing. Otherwise, it's just this leaderboard of the elite, and everyone else is you're out the race, aren't you, kind of thing. So I love that. And I think an interesting point we've talked about offline, but is this kind of where you sit in the wearables market, and everyone is there's so much data available, but why? And so why doesn't that? Why are you not going after this big pool of data, and why does that data not always equal behavior change?
Great question. I think that data creates awareness, and I think that's useful as a starting point, as the first step, but it's not the finish line. And that's where kind of a lot of the industry goes wrong. They put everything on, if there's more metrics, then people are going to have more motivation. But actually more, like that's TMI, and people find it that they get cognitively depleted. They actually get quite numb to the numbers over time. How many of us track our sleep, our steps, all of this stuff, but actually where's the meaning in it? I often say sometimes you need a degree in statistics to be actually able to interpret all of your data and what it means for me today, right now. Whereas that's where Myzone's stepping back and saying, okay, well, what metrics are actually meaningful for people? What's going to help keep them engaged, stay engaged? Because, you know, more information, I always say this, like, how many of us don't know that in order to be at our best, that we need to, you know, eat more vegetables, less sugar, have less alcohol, move more, stress less, put our phones away. You know, we know it, but information doesn't equal implementation. And so the way that Myzone are going about this is they're actually trying to create a meaningful way to translate that information into implementation. And they do so by focusing on those meaningful metrics, on those effort metrics, on things that actually will move the needle for people in terms of their greater health.
Nice. And what do those metrics look like? If you're an operator wanting to improve retention, what are you focusing on? What are those metrics you're focusing on?
Yeah, well, for me, it's the effort metrics in particular. I think, you know, having that real time in the moment and feedback is so important, because feedback is the flame that keeps that motivation fire lit. And we've got that ongoing progress feedback loop. It just helps people actually realize, right, I'm showing up, I've got here, and now I know I'm making the most of this. I'm getting the most out of this session. And it's very much your race, your pace, which is really important, as you said, for not the people that maybe aren't as accustomed to exercise as others. What we talk about in psychology is that they have lower self-efficacy, which is their confidence in their competence. So their confidence in their ability to do things.
Right.
And so actually what this does is it levels the playing field. So I can be next to, you know, a pro rugby player, having never set foot in the gym, but it doesn't matter. Because it's my race, it's my pace, and
Nice.
I'm doing what I can do that's best for me. And I think that that's really important. They're also looking at, with the help of Fahid and the team, we're looking at other metrics as well that are really quite meaningful, in terms of, you know, more personalised goals. How do we actually reflect back all sorts of different markers of progress to those individuals as well. So we're not just looking at what you haven't done, but we're actually showing people, actually, you know, this is how far you've come. Take a second, look back down the mountain. You've actually gone
Nice.
really, really far. And that's actually what's really, really motivating for people long term.
And I look at it and I think we already have all the data and the answers we need. I don't think the industry needs 12 more data points for people to achieve lasting behaviour change. We already have too many, and actually our research told us that a lot of consumers are really overwhelmed by how much data
Right.
they have. And how many times have you heard stories of people with certain wearables, all-day wearables, that they end up stop wearing them because the first thing they look at is their recovery score or their sleep score, and then that starts to control their life and control their mood because you know, it's overwhelming to them. So for us, I think we don't need more data. We felt like that wasn't a race that we wanted to take part in, and I've talked a lot in media on the fact that I felt like the industry and the leadership team at Myzone felt like the industry was zigging from a wearables perspective, and actually we should zag, right? Because actually what the industry doesn't need, in my opinion, even though we see another one launched every 5 or 6 months, is another all-day wearable collecting 1,000 data points. I'm not sure we need that, right? We've already got enough. I think what the industry was missing was that layer that helps people take that data and figure out the so what. Not the showing up, not the hindsight of what the data says, but actually what do I do next? And that's where the industry, I think, historically, and this is an industry that I've been in man and boy, that's where we've been failing, is that we're good at bringing people in and attracting them, but we're pretty poor at bringing them along for the ride on the journey. And so that's what we have decided Myzone should be all about, and really it was always about all along.
Yeah.
And so for us, it's about holding their hand through the journey and making sure that every part of the Myzone journey, right the way from onboarding, is set up for success. And we already know that once we get people to bronze status, which is 3 months of hitting their 1,300 MEPs a month, they are much more likely to stay. And so it becomes a lot about, okay, well, how do you get people to come for 12 weeks consistently and achieve 1,300 MEPs? And it's just a really interesting challenge, because it's also the challenge the industry's had for a long time,
That's
right?
true.
And
That's
so
true.
we have the same challenge, and that's what we've been focused on. And we've introduced streaks, we've introduced copper status. So
Okay,
that's
yeah, so
so when you join Myzone, historically you would come on and you would have no status, right? So it's almost
Right.
like you're not really part of the club until you've done a month of exercise. Well,
Right.
that didn't feel right. It didn't seem consistent with our values. And when we spent time with Heather, we knew that we needed to change that. So we introduced copper status, which is your first workout, you're in the club, you're on the journey. Next status is iron, which is 1 month, 4 weeks. And so we're bringing people on and we're nurturing through that journey. Streaks takes your 1,300 MEPs and breaks it down into 325 a week.
Nice.
So now it's not so much of a mountain to climb. And the team, Vahid and Tom in the marketing team, have completely fixed our onboarding as well. So we actually make it much easier to come in and understand what you need to do to keep showing up. So they're the ways that we're just taking all of these things and we're driving through the support.
What's interesting about that, and the secret sauce we've kind of layered underneath, is this kind of psychological theory that is one of the most studied theories in the sport and the fitness industry in terms of motivation, which is called self-determination theory. And what it is all about how do you create that sustainable motivation. And that's a theory that we've layered into and been conscientious about at every step of the way with Myzone. So that theory posits that if people have their basic human needs fulfilled, that they're much more likely to then sustain motivation.
Right.
And
Maslow's hierarchy sort of that sort of theory, right?
Exactly. So like, if we have these three conditions met, we're going to engage over the long term. And they are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So autonomy being like you feel like you have a sense of ownership, that the thing is your own. So like we're doing that through personalized goals, doing a really in-depth kind of goal setting piece, helping people make choices that feel relevant to them. Competence, which is all about your confidence and your ability to move. And the Myzone effort points, and stuff like the Blaze classes where you can see visibly in front of you your ongoing progress, your heart rate progress. Again, just enhances those feelings, this constant feedback loop reminding you, yeah, you're in the zone, you're in the right place, you're doing well. And then there's the final piece, which is relatedness, which we haven't really talked about much yet, but that sense of celebration, that sense of community, that sense of you're part of something bigger than just you alone. There's some really interesting research studies in psychology that look at this, and they got people, it's kind of, I say interesting because I'm a researcher, so I find all studies interesting, but they got, two sets of people to kind of stand at the bottom of a hill. They're wearing these really heavy backpacks. And when they stood on their own, they perceived the hill exactly accurately. When they stood with someone else, they saw it as less steep. And so when we're in community, we actually see things as less difficult, in particular when it comes to exercise. And I think Myzone harnesses that so well in terms of actually helping people get on with hard things because they're doing it in community and they're celebrated in community. And I think that that's a really, really important part, as well as it's what the research says is what brings about long-term change.
Yeah, I think big advocate as Jay is for the community piece. And I think it's only going to grow in the fitness industry. I think people have lost that office community, that you're working from home all the time.
Yeah.
You need community. This is an essential. And I think the AI stuff is going to drive people even more back to in-person, real-life stuff. So I think, I think it's such an important point. And what I think, talk to me about your focus on community and how it builds that out.
Yeah, well, there's kind of multiple ways to go about this. There's in-person community, but there's also a sense of being part of the tribe. And I think that's really important. And like you mentioned, with the streaks, with the kind of Hall of Fame, with all of the various levels that you go through, and with all of these kind of new features as well we're bringing in, that not only if you're in class or in the gym and you're, moving with others, which is, the primary way in which we can gain community, but also actually, we can gain connection through our digital community, and be in community through the fact that we are all moving together, maybe in separate parts of the world, right. But, we know what other people are doing, what other people are up to, and we can feel more connected. I know, as soon as I kind of signed up to the Myzone Go, I got loads of Myzone staff members, wanting to add me immediately.
Right.
For better, for worse. But immediately I felt like, there was other people. And it's interesting because psychologically, if we know someone else is watching, we're much more likely to try hard. Like how many of us have been on a treadmill, and someone's gotten on next to us, and we just go that little bit harder. And that's how we operate as humans. So even in a digital environment, as well as a physical environment, that community piece really matters.
Yeah, I think that's a really big part of what we bring to the industry as well, because remember we're a B2B business predominantly, so we have thousands of gym partners around the world, and as a former operator, I know how difficult it is to build those communities within the club, and that's what Myzone's bringing to the table for operators, is that ability to start creating those touch points. Because when you create that belonging, that sense of belonging, members are much more likely to stay and much less likely to go for a cheaper membership with newer equipment just down the road, because they have that community, that sense of belonging. And so that's something we're bringing to the table. And through the work we've done over the last year, we have 3 lenses we put on all product development. It either has to serve motivation, gamification, or community.
Nice.
So everything we do has to go through one of those lenses. If it doesn't serve that, we question why we're doing it. And the whole community piece is really fascinating, because again, I often think when you hear stuff like this, you think, okay, it just sounds like marketing sound bites, but I couldn't impress enough upon people listening and watching how much this comes alive in our business every day. Community, great example. We've got so much more to do, but even now, with the streaks and with the monthly recap and the yearly recap, and the celebrations of the status achievements within the journey, we've already seen a 3x multiplication on the number of social media shares. Now, social media shares have always been in Myzone, so they've always been there. If you wanted to, you could share your workouts, you could share things within the app, but very few people did.
Right.
And all of a sudden we're seeing this compounding multiplication effect where people are sharing more. And I think that's reinforced by the behavioral science, which is people are sharing because they're proud, and then that creates this nice self-fulfilling prophecy where people are supporting them and saying, well done. You can share weekly streaks right now. And so I think we're really excited about that element of community that we're bringing to the industry.
And it's interesting, I read one of your internal studies as well that showed that if people had like 3 or more likes or shares, they were much more likely to actually engage long term than those that didn't.
That's right. And so we recognize that element of our system is an area where we need to do a lot of work, and so we're trying to make it easier for people to connect with each other, people to find friends if they've joined not via a club, or if they don't know anybody in their local club where they've joined, also for them to like and engage with people's workouts. And so I think that's really exciting, because there's so much more that can be done in that space.
I really like that. Yeah, I really like that. How does that mechanism work? So how would, if I joined this club, or is it you're finding people locally? How does that work? Like the finding
so we work with gym operators
to
set up Myzone in a club. So we're in David Lloyd Royal Berks right now. We're in a Blaze studio, as you can see with the sign in the background. So they are selling Myzone devices and giving users the opportunity to have a Myzone experience. So Blaze class is run with Myzone tiles on the screen. So to Heather's point, everybody can see their effort, and the instructors can quite easily then know if somebody's not working as hard as they should be or is struggling maybe. It gives them the opportunity to go and give that one-to-one coaching, just leveraging the system and the technology. But then the app will actually serve up recommendations for them of other people that they can connect with, which is something that we never really did before.
Yeah, that's really cool. Making it a social network, sort of a closed social network.
Yep.
And then you're saying people are then sharing that stuff publicly to say an Instagram or
which is a great self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because then people are saying, hey, what's this? And they get to explain it's Myzone. They got it at their local David Lloyd club.
Nice.
And that then creates this rich kind of referral scheme for the club of bringing other people in from the community to want to join and get involved.
Love that.
Well, what's quite nice about that from a motivation point of view, it's not necessarily competitive as well, because you're only competing really with yourself.
Yeah.
And so that means that there's way more access to way more people. It's not just those top fit people, actually it's all people, because again, you're against yourself, so it's not got that kind of sense of competition that often makes access a little bit harder for an everyday person, and actually just opens the door for way more members to be able to engage.
Yeah, I love that. And you talk about that sort of monthly recap and weekly streaks. Is that almost like that? I'm picturing that Spotify rap style, like sharing your year.
Exactly. Yeah. And that again is a really nice virtuous circle, because we have a feature within Myzone where you can tell the app what you did. So if you put a belt on or use Myzone Go, which is our new smartwatch app, you'll do a workout. Let's say you get 150 reps. You can tell the app what workout you did, what activity you did, and that adds more value to your monthly recap. So at the end of your monthly recap, it will tell you kind of how many minutes you spent in each zone. It will tell you the biggest zone that you spent time in. It will tell you your most popular activity that you did, who your biggest cheerleader was, the person who supported you most within the system. Again, something driven by our work with Heather, so trying to really build that community. And then obviously all of those over the course of every month aggregate to then give you your yearly recap as well.
So if you're comparing people that stick with exercise over time and people that drop out, what's the key difference? Like?
They use Myzone.
Great answer.
No, the key difference goes back to those basic needs are fulfilled.
Right.
They don't feel that extrinsic pressure to perform, to lift a certain amount, to run at a certain speed, all
Right.
of those things,
Right.
or to lose X amount of weight. They actually genuinely can see the contribution that moving makes to their lives.
Right.
And that's like a real sticky factor. Is in essence as well as they have more fun. They enjoy it more because they can see it. It's not a chore anymore. It's not something that they feel obliged to do. It's actually something like a way to hang out with their friends, a way to feel more confident, more competent in themselves, a way to build mastery, a way to build skills. Becomes part of their identity over time. They are a Myzone user. They are someone who moves more, and that reinforcing effect just creates lifelong movement. So if those needs are nourished, like I said, the autonomy, the competence, the relatedness, feeling a sense of community, you feel like you're progressing in what you're doing, and you feel like you've got choice and ownership, that is just a beautiful environment for a lifelong relationship with movement.
And I love that because I think, having been in the industry for so long, I do think reflecting on what we get right and what we get wrong, and I think the industry is amazing, right? I'm the biggest cheerleader of the industry. I love it. I think there's so many passionate people. We have to be honest about where we're not doing really well. And you think about the people that maybe burn bright and then drop out. Do they ever really feel part of it? Do they identify as somebody who is active and exercising, or are they kind of coming in but never really feeling part of the tribe? And so I loved what Heather said at the start around it's not really about individual traits. And I think as an extension of that, I like to think maybe if people drop out and lose motivation, it's not really a failure of the individual. It's a failure of the system, right? The system that was supporting them is maybe not there. And so, to your question, like what do people who stick at their goals and make lasting behavior change look like in our industry? They're probably members of amazing clubs where everybody's providing great support. They're very clear on where they sit in there. They identify as part of the club. They've got amazing community members that are friends of theirs. And we all know what it's like. If you're due to work out and you're having a rubbish day and you don't feel like working out, you can not go. But if you're going to meet somebody, you go because you don't want to let down your friend, right? And you've got that commitment. And so I think that's always been at the epicenter of our industry. The best clubs that I'm fortunate enough to travel around the world over the last 15, 20 years and see some incredible clubs. The best ones I've ever seen aren't always the ones that look the most beautiful. They're the ones where community is at the center of what they do. And it's all about the people, and it's all about the system around those people and them achieving their goals. And what we're building and continue to build with Myzone and Motec is to give more club operators access to that system so that they can create environments that nurture behavior change.
Guys, an absolute pleasure to have you on. Looking forward to have you involved at PerformX in a few weeks. And where can people find out more?
It was great. Thank you so much. We loved it, and we can't wait to be at PerformX. Really easy. Go to myzone.org, and we've actually got a white paper which Heather helped create, which really digs into some of the behavioural science and talks a little bit more about some of the stuff we mentioned today. So that's a great next place to go.
Brilliant. Really enjoyed today's conversation. Really fascinating stuff. But pleasure.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Giles.
Thank you.